Now let's discuss flop strategy. And first, we're going to be discussing betting versus checking. All right, when you are first to act or when it checks you on the flop, you have four possible decision pairs that you can make. You can bet and then continue if you get raised. And you're going to be doing that with your premium made hands. We're going to be discussing what a premium made hand is in just a second. But we are betting, we are putting money in the pot, and then we are continuing if we get raised. So if we have a very strong hand, like a set, three of a kind, or a straight, we're betting that hand, we're trying to get money in the pot, and if our opponent raises us, we're not folding. Okay? Next, we can bet and then continue, or bet and then fold with our draws. So we're betting, and then we're going to decide what to do based on the strength of our draw, because draws come in various strengths, from straight draws with a flush draw with two overcards, which has a load of outs, all the way down to like an overcard and a backdoor flush draw, which has basically no outs or relatively few outs. So if you have a premium draw, you're betting it and you're not folding it. And if you have a weak draw, you're betting it and you're folding it if you get raised. So that's what we are betting with for the most part. And next, we have our checking range. We are checking and then calling if our opponent bets with our marginal made hands. So we're checking and then calling. This is going to be something like if we have a marginal pair, like middle pair, we're going to check. If our opponent bets, we're going to call. And then we're checking and then folding with our absolute junk. And so these four hand types are generally going to inform the decisions that you can make. So these four hand types are a method to roughly categorize your hands, your specific hands that you can have in your range, into various levels of strength to inform if you should be betting them or checking them. So, for example, you could have a premium made hand that we are betting and then continuing with. This is usually going to be something like a strong top pair or better made hand. So take a second, ask yourself, what is a premium made hand on Queen 9-7, two hearts? Well, logically, a hand like top pair with a good kicker, or two pair, or an overpair, or three of a kind. Those are going to be your premium hands that you are trying to bet and then not fold because they are so good. All right, your draws can, like I said, range in strength from flush draws to straight draws to backdoor draws. So, like I said, this category is going to fluctuate a lot depending on the board composition and or your range composition and the board's texture. So, like on this board, Queen 9-7, there's clearly a lot of draws available. But on a board like Ace 7-3, the only draws available are weak gut shot straight draws, right? So you have to be looking for draws in that scenario, whereas here, the draws are going to be pretty obvious. You're going to find that the weakest draws on draw-heavy boards that have a lot of draws possible, like this one, usually are just not very good. Like right here, if we had, let's say, 6-4 of diamonds for a backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw that's quite weak, that's just not a good hand. That's just total junk. But if you have a hand like, King 10 of diamonds, that actually becomes a reasonable draw because the king is an overcard, the backdoor straight draw is a little bit better, and the backdoor flush draw is better. So 6-4 diamonds in this scenario is just very bad. King 10 of diamonds is a hand that you can bet, and if you get raised, you can probably just fold it. And then you also have your good draws like 10-8, Jack 10, also flush draws. Those are going to be draws that you are happy betting and then not folding if you get raised. Next, we're going to have marginal made hands. These are usually weak top pairs down to ace high type hands. These are hands that you are checking with the intention of calling if you face a bet. Now, I want to make it clear, the ace highs that you're going to check and then call with are going to be the good ace highs on boards like this that are very coordinated. If the board was less coordinated, then you can continue with more of the ace highs. Like right here, ace 3 of spades is just very bad, right? Whereas ace king of diamonds is pretty good. And we're calling ace high a marginal made hand because realistically, if it does check down, like you check the flop with ace king, you check the turn, you check the river, if you don't improve, you can still win at the showdown, right? Whereas with weaker hands, like let's say king high, you probably aren't going to win at the showdown because your opponent's going to have ace high or something like that. So anyway, with these top pairs, you are checking, looking to check call. So a hand like king 9 is a very clear middle pair, good kicker. We're checking and then we're calling if our opponent bets. And then our junk is just going to be no backdoor draw, really. No good backdoor draw, at least. No straight draw, no pair, none of that. So a hand like Jack 6 of clubs, 5-4 spades, really like Ace 3 of spades, King 3 of spades, those are all going to be junk in this scenario, and we're just checking and giving these up. Now, one thing worth noting here, notice that our premium made hands, we're betting, right? and we're also betting our draws. So when we're betting and we're applying aggression, our opponent doesn't really know if we have a premium made hand or a draw. So they don't know if we have a good hand or a bluff, like a semi-bluff, right? Semi-bluff is a bluff that has some outs to improve to a better hand. And that puts them in a tough guessing game when we're betting. Notice when we're checking, if we're checking our weak top pairs all the way down to like ace high that we're check calling, and then also some garbage, our opponents don't know if we plan on calling or folding when we bet. And that's going to result in them not being able to just mindlessly bluff us. What a lot of people do wrong is that they have a checking range that is far too weak. So when they're checking, it's usually just with a lot of junk. And when they're betting, it's usually with their decently strong hands, but not nearly enough draws. So that makes their betting range very strong, which means their opponents can just get out of the way and fold. And their checking range is very weak, which means all their opponents have to do to crush them is just bet. And you want to make sure that you do not do that because those players are very, very easy to play against. All right, so on this flop, let's categorize the following hands. Flop is King of Clubs, Jack of Hearts, Four of Spades, and take a second and categorize these hands. We have Ace King, 9-8 of Hearts, Pocket Tens, Queen 9 of Spades, and Jack 9 of Diamonds. Pause the video, go ahead, categorize them into premium made hands, draws, marginal made hands, or junk. I'll wait on you. All right, you got it? You committed to it? Okay. Ace King is a premium made hand here. Top pair, top kicker is great. We are trying to get money in the pot. 9-8 of Hearts. You may think that this counts as a draw, given it is a backdoor flush draw with a backdoor straight draw, but it's not very good. If you do make a straight when it comes Queen 10, you still lose. Also, if you get a pair, it's not particularly good. If you get a backdoor flush, I mean, yeah, that's pretty good, but it's not going to happen all that often. So this is not a good draw. This is just junk. You're happy to check it and then fold. Pocket Tens is a marginal made hand. You're going to find that on the flop, basically all pairs, for the most part, maybe not all pairs, the majority of pairs are either premium made hands or they're marginal made hands. You are not checking the flop, planning on folding a hand like Pocket Tens if your opponent bets. The plan is to check call the flop with Pocket Tens, and then actually fold it if your opponent bets the turn. And you may say, well, why would I check call the flop but then fold the turn? Should I just fold immediately? And it turns out, no, you shouldn't. You need to make sure that you are calling your opponent's flop bets a decent amount of the time, because if you just check fold hands like tens, all your opponent has to do is just be a little bit aggressive and they're going to run you over. And you have to realize your opponent is not always going to keep betting the turn whenever you check call the flop, so your pocket tens wins very often when you check it down. Sometimes you get lucky and get a 10 on the turn and you win a bunch of money. And also when you're checking the flop and check calling, you're doing this not just with a hand like pocket tens, but also with a hand like king 9 suited, that you know you're not folding to any normal turn and river, right? So your opponent can't just run you over by betting the flop and the turn and the river, because you are going to be sure your checking range is well protected. And I'm going to show you how to do that throughout this course. Queen 9 suited, Queen 9 of spades. This is definitely a draw. This is a hand that if you check and your opponent bets, you probably have to fold it. But if you bet it and your opponent folds, that's clearly great. If you bet and you get the 10 on the turn, that's obviously great too. So this is a very clear draw. And Jack 9 of diamonds is a very, very clear marginal made hand, middle pair, bad kicker. This is a hand that if you check and your opponent bets, you're very happy calling on the flop, you're pretty happy calling on the turn, and you'll probably end up folding it out on the river if you fail to improve. But remember, you also have some weaker kings in your range that will also not fold. And remember, whenever you do check call with a hand like Jack 9, sometimes you get there on the turn and you make 2 pair or you make 3 of a kind and you're very happy. It's important to realize that the hand types are relative and are going to be highly dependent on the various flop texture, also dependent on your entire range composition. And this is going to be very clear with the draws. Sometimes draws are going to be very, very strong, like mostly good, strong flush draws that you're happy betting and getting money in, whereas other times your draws are going to be very junky, and we'll explain that as we continue going through this course. Okay, general rules for betting. When you are betting, you want to have 1 premium hand to 2 draws, which are going to be your bluffs. So you have 1 value hand to 2 bluffs when you are betting the flop, with the 2 number being the most bluffs you can have. So it's fine to have a 1 to 1.5 ratio or a 1 to 1 ratio, but you can have up to 2 draws to every 1 premium made hand on the flop. And that's because some of your draws are going to improve on the turn to be made hands, right? And also you're not going to continue bluffing with all of your draws on every single turn. So it's okay to be bluffing more than a 1 to 1 ratio. So you're going to find that you can have 33% premium made hands when you're betting to 67% draws at most. Again, if it's like 50-50 or 40-60, that's okay too. And your checking range, you want your marginal hands to be about 70% of your checking range and your junk to be about 30% of your checking range. And it's fine to have fewer or a smaller combination of junk. So you want to make sure that the weaker side of your range, the draws and the junk, is this number or less. So say it's like 80-20, it's fine. But you don't want to have 60% marginal made hands and 40% junk, because then what's going to happen is if you check and your opponent bets, you're just folding way too often. Also, when you're out of position, you're going to find that your premium hands generally get a little bit weaker, which result in you having to check with essentially a stronger range, right? So when you're betting, you want to be betting even less often when you're out of position. And that further helps to protect your checking range. If you check with some of your strong hands when you're out of position, you become just substantially more difficult to play against. And you can use the range analyzer, which I'll be explaining in just a second, to determine how to categorize your hands. Here is a visual breakdown of what I just explained. This is the hand types flowchart that will help you make your decision of when to bet and when to check. So as you see here, when we're betting, we have 33% premium made hands that we're going to continue with if we get raised. Then we have 67% draws, which we're going to figure out what to do when we get raised based on our pot odds, based on our opponent's raise size, etc., based on our hand strength, right? And then our marginal made hands we're checking, and then we're check calling, checking and continuing with the marginal hands, and we are checking and folding with the junk. So notice, so far we've only been discussing when you should bet and when you should check. We have not discussed bet sizing at all, which is a very important part of no limit hold'em. It's not one bet size only hold'em. So we're going to get to that very soon, so be patient. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to categorize all the hands in a particular range using the range analyzer, and we are going to see what our range looks like. We're just going to naturally break these down. We're not going to try to get too fancy initially. Okay, everyone folds to you under the gun +2, and you raise to 2.5 big blinds, and it folds around to the big blind who calls. The flop comes 9-7-5, diamond spade club, or diamond club spade. Categorize the following hands, and then we're going to put the range analyzer here to look at how we would play our entire range. So take a second and ask yourself, what does pocket jacks seem to be on this board? It's decent overpair. Decent overpairs are usually premium made hands. What about ace-10? Well, ace-10 has 2 overcards, but it also has some showdown value with that ace high. So this is probably a hand that you can reasonably check and then call. So this is going to be a marginal made hand. Ace-3 of spades. Backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. 1 overcard. It'd be bad kicker, though, if we did get the ace. This is going to be somewhere between a draw and junk, and it's probably just going to be on the junky end. This is not a particularly great draw, especially on a board that has a whole lot of other draws available, right? Like notice any 8 is a draw, any 6 is a draw, any like decent 2 overcard hand with backdoor draws is better than this hand to some extent because it just is going to make over pairs or pairs bigger than top pair on the flop better more often. So this is not a particularly good draw. This is usually going to be junk. Ace jack of diamonds. So 2 overcards, backdoor flush draw, backdoor straight draw. This is a substantially better hand than ace-3 suited, ace-3 of spades. This certainly could fall somewhere between a marginal made hand and a draw. And we'll take a look at how that would line up in the range analyzer, but it's probably going to end up being a draw. Queen 10 of hearts, this is definitely a draw. Actually, I'm sorry, Queen 10 of hearts is not a draw because notice it doesn't have the backdoor flush draw. Backdoor flush draw actually does matter. You may think backdoor flush draw never comes in, does it? Well, turns out it does every once in a while. It's not just that it lets you win the pot when you get there, but you also get to keep betting very reasonably on the turn when you turn a flush draw, which lets you realize your equity better unless you pick up the pot sometimes when it doesn't belong to you, right? Okay, if it was Queen 10 of, Queen 10? Oh, we changed it here. If it was Queen 10 of diamonds or something like that, then we would be more inclined to call it a draw. Okay, so look, notice what we've done here. Let's take this slow. If you've never seen this before, I realize it can be overwhelming. You'll get used to it by the end of this course, though. Don't worry. Let's take a look at all the hands in red. These are our premium made hands, okay? Premium made hands are betting. These are our overpairs, top pair, top kicker, and sets. Good, strong hands that we are happy betting and not folding on this board, right? What are our marginal made hands? Let's do those next. These are going to be hands like middle or like top pair okay kicker down to hands like ace high. Notice here we have king 9 down to 9-8. We have some 7s. We have some 5s. Only not very many 5s, clearly, just ace 5 suited. Then we have some ace highs. Ace king down to ace 10. Now, what about our draws? This is where it gets a little bit difficult to very clearly define, but we'll start with the logical ones. Any hand with an 8 or a 6 that does not have showdown value with an ace or a pair pretty much counts as a draw, right? So we have king 8, jack 8, 10 8. Notice 8 7 is not a draw because it has a pair to go with it, right? Notice ace 6 essentially counts as a marginal made hand. You could bet this if you felt like it, though. That would make logical sense. Ace 8 is definitely a marginal made hand, though, because it's just a little bit better. And then that's not all that many draws if you just think about it. Look, it's only 4 combinations of each of these, right? So that's 12 combinations of draws, and we have 42 combinations of premium made hands here. So we need to come up with a lot more draws. And we do that by taking the overcards with the backdoor flush draws, and also hands containing a 10 that don't have showdown value. You may say, why a 10? Because if a 6 or if an 8 comes, we have open-ended straight draw on the turn. If a jack comes, you see we have a straight draw as well. And that's kind of powerful. Also, the hands with a 10 all have overcards, right? So if you have king 10 and you get a king on the turn, you're pretty happy. So these are essentially like 6-out draws to overpair or to a pair better than top pair. Plus they have additional outs every once in a while when they get an 8. They can keep barreling. And sometimes even if they get like a jack on the turn, right? They have the extra outs too. And then we also have a few hands that are just like straight up overcards with backdoor flush draws, like king, queen of spades. If you take a look at ace, queen of spades and ace, jack of spades, these hands certainly could count as marginal made hands. They're somewhere in there. And then we have some junk. Our junk is going to be hands like just overcards without a whole lot of potential, like king, queen offsuit. If you bet king, queen offsuit and get called, you're almost always behind, and you have 6 outs to improve, but it's not a particularly great spot to be in. You'd much rather have additional backdoor straight draws, backdoor flush draws, etc. And then the low ace-x suited, these are just not very good hands. So this is the natural breakdown of this range, okay? Now, this is how I would, if I was sitting at the poker table thinking about how to categorize my range, this is what I would come up with if I just had to tell you what it looks like on the fly. However, whenever you're studying poker, you want to make sure that these percentages line up to those ratios we mentioned earlier. Let's go back over here. 33% to 67% draws, 70% to 30% marginal made hands to junk. What do we have here? Well, notice it's 17% to 22% premium made hands to draws, which is more than 50-50, more than 1-to-1, but it's nowhere near 1-to-2 because we can have up to 34% draws here, right? So we actually could use some more draws if we felt like it. What about our marginal made hands to junk? Well, this is almost not quite 70-30. We could really use either more marginal made hands or fewer junk hands. So an easy way to actually make this range just a little bit better and get closer to a somewhat GTO strategy would be to take some of the junk and move it to the draw category. So take a second and think about the logical hands you'd like to do that with. Well, I think queen jack and king jack make a lot of sense. Notice here, if we took away 12 combinations of each of these, that would leave us with 24 combinations of junk. So then we'd have 100 to 24, which gives us whatever this is, 80-20 ratio, right? Which would be better because that would strengthen our checking range. And we would add 24 combinations to the draw category. That would make this number go up to about 80. Then we'd be looking at a 1-to-2 ratio. So by studying this scenario and thinking about it away from the table, we could play a better strategy than the way that most people would logically break this down if they spent even a little bit of time thinking about this. And that's going to make you play better poker. And the goal here is not to necessarily teach you the game theory optimal strategy, but to allow you to develop a strategy like this at the table to where you are able to reasonably categorize these hands the vast majority of the time on the fly. And by the end of this course, you should be able to do that. I've taught many students to do it, mainly through the homework at pokercoaching.com. If you want a lot of extra practice, go check out that. And this is going to go a long way to helping you make the best decision you possibly can in the vast majority of scenarios at the poker table. And while there certainly are corner cases, this strategy is going to be pretty difficult to play against. It's not the perfect GTO strategy, but it is very, very strong. And I just want to show you here. This is what the actual game theory optimal strategy is here. This is using a program called PioSolver. And what this shows you here is we're betting 2/3 pot with 36.86% of hands. We're betting a third pot with 17.31% of hands, and we're checking with 46% of hands. And notice, a lot of these cells are multiple colors, right? Like let's take a look at pocket kings here. This says you should bet bet 2/3 pot roughly half the time with it, bet a third pot roughly 25% of the time, and check roughly 25% of the time. Now, hate to break it to you, but it's going to be very, very difficult for any human, you, me, anybody else, to memorize these scenarios or to be able to come up with these scenarios on the fly and then be able to actually implement that strategy. Because how do you know which 50% of the time this is or which 25% of the time this is, right? And for all I know, this is actually like 55%, 20%, 30% or something like that. To the point that this is not implementable at all. And that's why we've developed this strategy, because you just make all of these plays 100% of the time and you're going to be playing pretty close to well. However, you do want to look at the solver for essentially the ability to check your work to see if these ratios you come up with at the top are close enough. I'm not going to say they have to be exactly the same, but they need to be close enough. One thing worth mentioning whenever we do get to bet sizing is that I'm usually going to recommend just one bet size on the flop because it's a whole lot easier to implement. And very often the solver will do something like recommending 2/3 pot, 45% of the time, a third pot like 5% of the time, and then checking 50%. And whenever the solver is not recommending using one particular bet size all that often, you can kind of ignore it. Remember, we're trying to play close enough to this where you can do it at the table in real time and not screw it up on a regular basis, which is what a lot of people do because they just end up guessing. Okay, so we can use the solver to essentially check our work. Let's take a look at some of these hands that very frequently like to bet, right? We have hands like ace-9 that really likes to bet, pocket jacks really likes to bet. And then we have some hands like queen-jack suited, jack-10 suited, queen-10 suited. These hands all like to bet a decent amount of the time, so you want to make sure you're betting some of these. Also notice stuff like king-10 is used as a bluff about half the time, which is relevant. So notice these hands bet sometimes. Ace-high bets sometimes. Again, it's kind of difficult to make too many big assumptions out of this. But you're going to see that our strategy lines up decently well with this. And you also want to look at the solver to see patterns, right? Like notice here, top pair, top kicker bets more than top pair, bad kicker. Okay, so you should know this. For the most part, when you're betting top pairs, you want to be betting with the best top pairs more than the weaker top pairs, which we did here, right? And I want to make it clear, I made this before I even looked at the solver, right? This is just me studying that enough to know roughly what these patterns look like. Interestingly enough, though, take a look at pocket aces. Pocket aces actually checks like 60% of the time, whereas pocket 10s and jacks basically never check. Well, why would that be? The tough thing about using a solver is it actually doesn't tell you why it does anything. You have to figure that out yourself. But it makes some logical sense that pocket aces and pocket 10s are both very strong hands. But pocket aces is way less likely to get outdrawn on the turn if you let it go check-check than pocket 10s is. Because pocket 10s has to worry about any overcard, also a 9, 8, 7, 6, or 5. Whereas pocket aces really only has to worry about 9, 8, 7, 6, or 5. So that's why aces does check sometimes in this scenario. That said, the overpairs bet the vast majority of the time. And for simplicity, remember we're trying to make this simple, you might as well just bet with all of them. One outlier you'll see very clearly here is 9-8 suited bets basically every time. You're going to find that usually top pair with a gut shot straight draw often does end up betting, and 9-8 on this board is a gut shot straight draw. But we had a list over here to check because for simplicity, marginal made hand, we're checking with it. That said, if you bet with it, it's not that big of a deal. You can really go either way. But you want to use the solver to essentially check your work to make sure these numbers are pretty close. And remember, over here, so the solver checks 45%. Notice we were initially checking 60%, but like I said, we would have edited this if we were categorizing the hands a little bit better. That would have moved some hands from our checking range up to our betting range, and we would have ended up with roughly the same percentage, which means we did pretty close to right. And it turns out if you can get the betting and checking frequencies of the solver pretty close to right, and you are making sure we are sticking with these ratios among our betting and checking range, then you're going to be playing pretty close to the solver. And it turns out it isn't actually all that difficult to learn to do this in the vast majority of spots. And once you learn how to do this, you're going to be well on your way to knowing when to bet and when to check in every scenario you encounter. Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. I hope you're enjoying the Thanksgiving Day marathon. I hope you're soaking up all of this great content that we've produced over at pokercoaching.com. And I want to tell you about my Black Friday sale that's taking place right now, where you can get up to 78% 20% off many of the amazing products I've made and my coaches have made over the last few years. So, for the first time ever, I made a gigantic tournament masterclass. This thing is over 30 hours long, not even including the many hand reviews that I made to go along with this, including wins in regular tournaments, PKO tournaments, and satellites. You can actually only get the Cash Game Masterclass if you are a member of Poker Coaching Premium. And normally, we charge $99 a month for Poker Coaching Premium. But if you subscribe for a 3-year subscription, you can actually get it for less than the regular price of the Poker Coaching Standard membership. You can get 3 years for $1,399. It's a little bit less than $39 per month. And if you want to get good at poker tournaments or cash games, well, this is for you. Also, we have a poker coaching membership where you get access to loads of content, including over 1,000 quizzes. Also, we have lots and lots of classes. We have a monthly homework assignment that I go through and make sure all the students are playing well. We have a Discord channel. We have a vibrant community. All of that is there at pokercoaching.com. Regular price is $39 per month, but if you sign up for a 3-year membership, it's $299 for 3 years, which comes out to $8.30 per month. How much is that per day? Not a lot, like 30 cents per day. Hate to break it to you. If you have any desire to be good at poker, you probably need to be spending more than 30 cents per day on high-level educational content like we have at pokercoaching.com. Here's one of my students, Blas Zerjau. You may have heard of him. He turned $5 into $1.3 million on Party Poker a few years ago. And then just recently, this last year, he turned $100 into $400,000 again on Party Poker. He says pokercoaching.com has helped him lay strong foundations to excel at no-limit hold'em games and to further work on his game with my help. He's absolutely crushing it. His results are not typical. I don't have results that good over the last few years, but he has been absolutely crushing it. He's been a Poker Coaching member for a very long time. Like we said, you can get Poker Coaching Premium now for less than the price of Poker Coaching Standard if you sign up for 3 years. As you see, loads and loads and loads and loads of content. I didn't even mention our GTO preflop charts. We have extensive GTO preflop charts. There's an app for your phone. You can access those on your phone, and the vast majority of the material we discussed here. We also have 30-day challenges to give you little bits of content every day to ensure that you are working hard and developing good study habits. Because if you study even 30 minutes a day, every day, you're going to be really good at poker in about a year or so. So we make sure that all of our students are doing that. Like I said, you can get 3 years for only $1,399. Check it out at pokercoaching.com/Black Friday. And understand that I created Poker Coaching Premium to give you all the tools and training that you will ever need to achieve your full potential as a poker player. That is what I want for you. But if for some reason you think I have failed to deliver on that promise, I do not want or deserve your money. I am not running a training site here where I'm just trying to get your money up front and then quit poker and not teach you anything else and not provide additional content. We are consistently hiring the best players in the world to teach you how to succeed at poker. And if you think I fail at that, ask me for a refund and I will give it to you. No questions asked. You have 30 days after you sign up. If you don't like it, ask for a refund. No questions asked. You'll get your money back because, look, if I don't help you, I don't deserve it. Simple as that. I don't really know how I can be any more fair. So that's it. Hope you are enjoying this Thanksgiving Day marathon. Thank you very much for taking time to watch it. Hope you learn a little bit. Hope you learn a lot. You might as well. And again, if you want to sign up for pokercoaching.com to get access to all of this stuff that we've discussed, I know it's a lot, but if you want access to all of this stuff, go to pokercoaching.com/Black Friday. Happy Thanksgiving. Have a great day and enjoy the rest of the show.